Okay. All right, real life. Welcome everybody to Rapid Diffs Frontend Architecture weekly discussion. Stas, you have the first point.
Yeah, I'm finishing up UX refactoring investigation, looking for which data we need for our components from UX. It seems our biggest consumer of UX is discussions, obviously, because it really ties to the Notes app. Other than that, I didn't find too much of UX dependencies that would block us from just straight up refactoring these to props and events. For example, we have a file browser on the left side. It uses some data from UX, but it's only like 2-3 levels deep. So essentially you can just move these calls to the top of the app and pass the data as props, receive actions as events, and call them in the root app. That would simplify the connection part. If we want to connect a certain component to a certain piece of code, that would make things easier. But the logic itself that lays in Vuex, it still has to be refactored if we like to use the same logic in the rapid diffs, for example. So what I suggest is that we start with the step one, like remove UX calls, move it all to the top level if possible. And in most cases, I don't see any downsides to that. And then start actually refactoring Vuex. So for example, stripping parts that are heavily tied to div file data. And if some logic is not tied to div file, we can actually separate it into another store. It can be Pinia as example. And that way we'll keep the logic both on our current diffs and we will be able to reuse it in the rapid diffs as well. So there's that.
That's interesting. Thanks, Stas, for looking into it. Um, do we need what am I going to ask? What's the A lot of this makes sense to me, but I'm not sure if we need to run this past all the teams. What's your thoughts there?
Well, the only other team is Plan. Natalia is there, so she may add something to this.
Yeah,
So,
Natalia.
so we don't really care what happens to the nodes as long as the nodes application in issues will be working, because we are moving issues to work items, and work items have completely different discussions applications. So issue is being considered like a legacy issue right now. So don't break it. And if you don't break it, it's completely fine to change anything you want there.
And will there still be cases of issues that uses the legacy code once the migration is completed, or will the migration be
When the
complete?
migration is completed, all the issues will be using the work items code.
All right. So this is essentially just a temporary for you on the plan side, would just be temporary. For us, not so much. We need to
Yeah,
we also
exactly.
have a separate discussion about that work items and merge requests, but
Yeah, but that's completely separate from the Diffs right now. So basically, you will be the only owner of discussions application after we move to work items. It can take some time, but again, we don't plan any improvements or deep changes to the discussions and nodes, applications or components. So please feel to refactor them. Like, don't
yeah.
break.
Sure. No, what I'm thinking is, but that introduces another aspect to the work items discussion, which is essentially this will create a rift between notes on MRs won't get updates done to notes on work items because it's different code base. And that's something for us to take into account on that discussion. Here, Stanislav, I don't know what that means for us here, but I'm not sure. It wouldn't make sense for us to block this rapid diffs effort on moving MRs to work items, but there might all the effort we'll be doing here might be temporary as well. That's what I want to get to. That if we are to move the discussions on merge requests in a way to work items, the Notes app in particular, that might be sunset at some point, even though we'll have discussions on diffs to worry about forever. But the Notes side of things, the overview side of things, ideally would have that in sync with whatever the plan team is working with to benefit from both way improvements for the long run, but that's separate. But I wanted you to have that idea in case that affects the way you make those decisions about the Notes.
Yeah, and also once we go through the step one, I don't have any specific details how we will go through step one with the Notes app because it's quite large. But once we reach it, if we find parts that can be easily migrated to props and events, that essentially means we can just add the logic from the work items on top of it. We don't need to refactor the whole thing. Or even reuse some of the work items components. I assume they use Apollo state management, but we can still use this as well, just because everything is a component.
Got it. So question to you, Stanislav, should we create some issues around this so we can plan work? Or will you just include that in the current issue structure?
I would add some of the MRs that are like simple refactorings in this issue. And for the discussions, I think we need a separate issue because it's a much bigger effort.
Please do.
And I also don't want to break nodes.
Yes. All right. Can you take care of that?
Yeah.
One, but we'll open a separate issue for discussions. All right. Makes sense. I'll put this as your task. And please, yeah, I think we can go on to the next point.
I wanted to talk about composition API. Once I dove deeper into our code base, I figured there are not so many cases where we can actually use it. And since nodes are kind of a legacy app, it doesn't make much sense to find smart ways to reuse the logic because like nodes is not maintained anymore. I guess like it's not adding new features to the nodes. And the only big case where I found composition API can benefit us is a single mixin that is used in diffs and in nodes that does some magic to diff lines. And like bringing composition API just for this mixin is kind of an overkill. My original thought process with composition API was regarding refactoring Vuex to composition API, but as more I learned about Pinia, I figured like it doesn't make sense to reinvent Pinia at GitLab. We should just fix the existing solution and not try to be overly complicated about this topic. There's also an alternative path. We can actually create multiple Vuex stores, but that would be like on the same level of complexity as we have right now. Like it will be a little bit less painful, but still very painful. And if you go with Pinia, I don't see any big downsides so far. Like it's reusable, and the great benefit is that we can actually refactor directly to Pinia without changing the logic of the actions or of the getters. It all stays the same. So with Pinia, actually, we don't need composition API, I think, so far.
Okay, so we can table that discussion, put that on hold in case something falls through with Pinia or something changes in that regard. And we can always revisit this decision. But so for now, we don't plan any work around it. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I actually asked Natalia to join this call because we wanted to discuss composition API, but so far it seems like there's just no place to apply it in Diffs right now, so it can benefit us.
Okay. That sounds good to me. There's still one of the things that I want to get more clarity on from Thomas is after he does his initial POC from the data access layer of what's in his mind, there might be other ideas where this might be playing a part. But for now, I think we can just move along with all the other work that we've planned out for preparing the Vuex migration and the 3-layer architecture that we've talked about. And in the meantime, I hope that we have something for next week's call from Thomas so we can have that discussion inform the work for 17.1. That way we can have more clarity there. Cool. Anything else on this point? Composition API. So, till or if. All right. Any other points of discussion? How's the Vue component HAML work going, evolving?
I'm getting to that right after the Vuex stuff.
Okay.
I think we will depend on some of the Vuex refactorings for this.
It will depend on what, sorry?
Or on some of the refactorings, like if you want to showcase some of the integrations from Vue components to web components, we'll need to detach from Vuex. I don't want to bring the whole Vuex store to the RapidDiff.
Okay. Yeah, for me, this first work, I just want to see something being server-side rendered and being brought to the browser to begin with, because we already have 2 routes set up. One of the commits, one of the MRs. I'm not sure if the commits have been merged, but there's 2 things ongoing, and I want to start showing something that we can like materialize the rapid diffs into, so that then we can like have people make it evolve. There's also discussions I want to have with Paulina around accessibility, keyboard navigation, all of that stuff, and also keeping a lean markup on the server-side rendered content. So the earlier we get to that first stage, the better. So let's make sure that we have something in 17.0 for that, even though it might not be final at all, might be depending on a bunch of things, but just getting a basic version of it would be great.
I think we'll get to at least the diffs rendering part.
Okay. Without the tree, just the diffs.
Depends on the data. If I can get the data working, we can render the file tree.
Okay. Yeah, we can have that as a stretch goal. Don't put that as a requirement. So file tree will be treated as stretch goal. All right. We had some things at the top about some topics for the next call. I saw that you addressed the performance DOM manipulation last week. I don't know if there's anything else you want to talk about this week. And the styling. Didn't we have an outcome for the styling?
I've created an issue to test out Shadow DOM.
Ah, yes, investigate Shadow DOM. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
If it works, we'll use that.
Okay, got it. All right. Looking forward to that. Yeah, I think as soon as we get off this investigations or refactors and all that stuff, we'll have more action, which is good. Cool. Any other topics for today?
My biggest topic is kind of persuading Pinia more with GitLab engineers. Yeah.
What
Like
can we do to help?
That's a question. Should we have a consensus in the front-end team against Pinia? Like most of the people agree we should bring this, because some people are really against the idea of doing any more refactorings to our code, even though we're doing already lots of refactorings right now, and no one is challenging that. So I wonder how can we push Pinia a bit more, so at least in the rapid diffs it doesn't look so out of place.
Yeah, we can talk about this. I mean, I can take a look at what the feedback has been. One of the things that I am sensitive to is pushing work on other teams for things that are not, how should I say, giving problems, so to speak. So imagine you have a dormant app that you're now being told you're going to have to refactor this by the end of the quarter. Like, you want to find resistance there. But if you just point out, hey, if you're managing a Vuex app and it's giving you headaches and you need to evolve it, this is the way. And if you just define the way out of UX, I think you will have done a good job of like showing guidance to the rest of the engineers and how you get out of UX without paying the cost of migrating to Apollo, which is a thing, right? Migrating there would be ideal, but it's not possible. So if you have a high maintenance burden and you want to get out of UX, this is the way. You write the docs for that. And it seems like you have enough support from the front end team, from what I could see. I feel like that, and you push that out as a proposal. That should be okay.
What if we leave like most of the cases that do not require any maintenance just on the Vuex? Like, don't even try to persuade people refactoring this, because they will always tell us that it doesn't make sense.
I personally don't have a problem. You mean the ones that are not giving problems, just keeping them in UX, having that option?
Imagine Notes app. Like, there is no reason to refactor Notes app to Pinia just because we like Pinia. Like, it's a complex app. It will take weeks to fully refactor. But since it's not receiving any new features, it doesn't make sense, right? And we have apps similar to that are just pretty simple logic, but it's on the Vuex, and you don't want to touch it because it already works.
So those are the exceptions, right? If you write that into the guidance and you have a very clear way of categorizing which apps apply to this path and which don't, you still produce value by giving them a way forward from UX in a maintainable way without incredible effort. But you also tell them, hey, if for some reason your app falls into these categories, then it's fine keeping it that way. Nobody will come probing you. For me, I don't have any problem with that. Sorry, I don't have any problem with that. But you would end up with a situation where you have stuff in the code base that is not evolved to Pinia, it's still UX. Eventually, what you might want to do is if you have an app like this, make sure you add a comment somewhere saying that this is a stale UX app. Find a way to describe it or something. And that way you won't be, using that code as example because it's stale, but also it wouldn't make sense to pay the cost of refactoring that just for the sake of it and no benefit will come of it. If you're not working, so for example, like I have a couple of apps in source code, single file editor and snippets. So imagine somebody telling me, hey, you have to refactor this and pay like 3 milestone cost of weight of an engineer to do this work, and like barely even touch it. So I will be resisting that. But if somebody tells me, hey, if your app is dormant or not getting a lot of bug reports and stuff, you would fall into this category, but just make sure that you label that as stale, then I can do that. So I don't know. Anybody has any other perspectives?
There is also an option 3. Like, if someone comes to you and says, we have an initiative group, it will refactor your stale Vuex to new Pinia without any effort required from your side. I doubt any team will oppose this actively. Okay, my team will oppose this actively, but because we have Apollo. over there. Like if you try to refactor this to Pinia, like no, you will be banned from plan code immediately. Trust me. But like if people have Vuex code, they not adding much to, but someone is willing to refactor this for them. That's why we have task groups. Most of them will say, okay, if you force them to refactor this code, good luck.
Yeah, that's a good perspective. I would definitely be open to that, in having it, like have my engineers review it or something. But
yes, exactly. And if we could find, I know it sounds fantastic, more automated way, like based on, I don't know, any kind of automatic refactoring, replacement, whatnot, if we could find this code generation way, would be
Sure.
ideal. Probably not possible. But the point stays, like,
Yeah,
if overnight all the Vuex stores turned into Pinia stores, I wouldn't care.
yeah. I feel like that would be okay, fairly okay. I think from your experience, Stanislav, I think that would be a good test to see how automatic that conversion can be, or low interference, and make a decision out of that. But we could talk a little bit outside of this call, the rapid diffs, and come up with a plan. Okay.
Sure.
All right. Thanks for bringing it up. Anything else? Then thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow on the weekly. It's in the afternoon, right? Yes, it's in the afternoon. I'll hope to see you there. There it is. Got it. Thanks everybody, and thanks Stas for all these investigations and pushing this forward. Really good to see movement there, and looking forward to seeing those deliverables that we have in flight land. Okay, thanks
Yes,
everybody
well.
for your time. Thanks, Phil.
See you next day.